Our next guest turned file sharing between devices into a multi-billion-dollar business. Please welcome to the stage Dropbox co-founder and CEO Drew Houston and TechCrunch writer Josh Constantine.
Hey Drew, thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you, good to be here.
So you guys have had a pretty crazy ride the last few years. How many users do you have now?
So we have 200 million was the last number we put out.
How many developers?
100,000.
But you're even more impressive, I think, than that growth has been the growth of the employee count of your company. You guys have scaled up super fast.
Yeah.
How many people do you have now?
So we were 90 at the beginning of last year, and we're around 400 now.
That's huge, from 90 to 400 in a single year, that's epic. And some of those employees, these aren't people off the street. You're pulling employees straight out of Google and Facebook, and people with huge salaries and great retention packages. So that includes people like Soleil Cuervo, one of the most prolific designers at Facebook. Guido van Rossum is the father of Python. How are you getting these guys to come over?
Well, I think most great people want the same things. So they want to work on interesting problems with people that they respect, and they want to do things that they think are important. And so I think we offer a pretty interesting mix of being small enough where you can make a difference, but big enough where the things you work on affect millions of people. And then often for people like Guido or some of the other folks we brought in, it's a long process. We sort of lock our jaw on their leg and just like keep tugging for like 2 years, and eventually they relent.
What does that mean in real terms? Like, I know Mark Zuckerberg is famous for taking people for walks in the foothills to sort of espouse the future of Facebook and get them to jump over the fence. Do you have some strategy? Do you lock them in your jam room and rock out with them on guitar?
I think we just bug the hell out of them for a long time. So yeah, we have the jam room. There was one group of people that we'd take out for drinks. I called it the Manhattan Project. So it depends on the person.
But when you get these guys to come over, are you using cash or stock to incentivize them?
I think mainly they're incented by what we're doing. They join because they like who they'll be working with, and they think that what we're working on is important. And sure, stock is part of that, but I don't think that's. I mean, there's plenty of companies that can pay a lot of money.
All right, so let's look at the competitive landscape, and I don't want any kumbaya bullshit. So seriously, what's wrong with Apple iCloud?
I mean, if you ask our users, I think it's the limitation of just working with Apple stuff, I think, could be frustrating. I mean, otherwise, I think actually within the Apple ecosystem it works pretty well.
Really, that's it?
It keeps asking me to pay for it. Like every morning, it's like wake up, you get an alarm, and it's like, hey, you haven't like upgraded your iCloud storage yet. That's it.
And you guys are beating that with free storage?
We don't bother you as often. No, Dropbox works with all the different things you use. You don't have to worry about whether you have an Android phone or a PC or a Mac. People really like that freedom.
So what's wrong with Google Drive?
Are we just going to go down the list? Like, I think. I mean, look, all the big companies have products that like compete with ours, and I think the way we look at it, the reason why people stay on Dropbox is because it's easy and it just works. And I think if you look at the things that people want to do with Dropbox, like share photos or collaborate, they use Dropbox because their friends are using it or their coworkers are using it, and they just think the experience is simpler.
I mean, I think a lot of products would probably say, "Oh, we're really simple and it just works." So, how are you gonna beat these platform owners, especially as people are becoming more vertically integrated around their phones? They use their phone for everything, and then we're moving away from the desktop. Does your platform agnostic approach, does that work out in the mobile age?
Well, so one thing people need to remember is we've had competitors since the beginning, and the big companies have gotten more serious about it over time. But actually, if you look at our numbers, you can't really look at any moment when any one product launched and be like, oh man, that's that. The numbers haven't fallen, or the shape of the curve has stayed the same, even as other folks have put more effort behind it. And so One thing is we just want to provide the best experience, and I think again the user is the ultimate judge for us, and then supporting every single platform. And then when you think about the vertical integration, one thing we do is support developers really well. So we just had our developer conference at DBX, and we're giving developers much better and more comprehensive tools to solve a lot of the problems that they have, more so than the other big companies.
You talk about being the home for everyone's files, for all files, but you guys don't really focus very much on media, music and movies. Does that mean I have to go find another storage system to handle my huge MP3 collection?
Well, that's something where I think it is harder for us to provide a really great experience. Certainly as a user, it's frustrating. I watch stuff on iTunes, I have a Netflix account, I've got a Spotify account, I've got a Pandora account. I use all these things for similar but different reasons, and it's super fragmented, but that is an example where we're probably not going to have as good an experience on an iPhone as as good as Apple can make. And then there's so many companies that focus on that problem that we think there's all kinds of other stuff that no one's paying attention to.
Are you guys going to focus more on media in the future? Has it just been something you haven't gotten into yet, or is it really not in your wheelhouse at all?
We focus more on your stuff, like the stuff that you're working on, or that the pictures you take, and less on being yet another source of music or books or movies.
So what's wrong with Microsoft SkyDrive? No, that's not important. So there was a lot of chatter about your guys' valuation a few months back. People were saying, oh, they didn't raise at $4 billion, they raised at much less than that. When you raised that $250 million round, what was the valuation?
Oh, we confirmed it was $4 billion. Yeah, I mean that is true. That was a couple of years ago.
But you guys did do preferred stock for some people. Did some people get a different valuation?
I mean, no. We raised a preferred round at $4 billion valuation. So all that stuff as it was reported was correct. So.
All right, so let's talk about the IPO.
Okay.
Are you terrified of it? Do you not even care?
Well, part of the reason we raised all that money a couple of years ago is to have flexibility, total flexibility, to have plenty of runway to do whatever we want. And actually, we haven't even spent that money that we've raised. And so, we use this time to really just stay focused on products and on building the business. And I'm sure we'll go public at some point, but fortunately, it's not something we have to think about right now.
Are there any lessons you learned watching Facebook fall over itself and then slowly claw its way back up, or in Twitter's preparation, or any of the enterprise IPOs?
Well, I think there's a lot of foundational work that you have to get in place before you can be a public company, and I think it's something you can navigate around, but it's a big distraction, and so we're enjoying the time where we can just focus on the long term. We don't have to focus, we don't have to scramble around every quarter and stop what we're doing and worry about a bunch of stuff. Having seen a bunch of the other companies, they have to spend a lot of time on it. It's something that is a big distraction for the team and the founders.
So what would you recommend for a company that's getting towards their later stages and they don't want to deal with that distraction? Do you think you should just keep pushing it off, do secondary market offerings?
Well, I think it really depends on the company and the situation you're in. But yeah, in our case, if you think about why a company goes public, there's a branding event around it. There's shareholder liquidity. And maybe a small handful of other, having a currency for acquisitions, things like that. And you can accomplish all these things with the private market. And so for us, we've been able to have a lot of flexibility that maybe companies a generation ago didn't have.
All right, to go from stockpiling money into giving it away, you guys have built your company and your user base on giving away free storage.
Yes.
But in the last few months and year, we've seen a lot of other companies start to offer even more free storage than you provide. Are you guys going to keep up with this arms race?
Well, we haven't really changed much about the free space we give. We just want to tie it to you actually getting value out of the product. So instead of just giving a ton of free space out of the gate, we give it to you when you refer your friends or things like that. And another thing is, since the beginning, a lot of companies have given away more free space than we have. And as it turns out, a lot of our users and we focus less on gigabytes, because it's kind of, to the average person, a gigabyte is a pretty abstract thing, and it's more about the experience. And so we've seen a lot of our competitors, big and small, give away a lot more free space, and I think that will attract some people, but for most people, they're focused on other things.
So you're getting serious about the enterprise now.
Yes.
Can you tell me about what your grand plan for entering this very crowded market?
Well, we've actually, even if you go back to the original Y Combinator application, when we started Dropbox, like helping people at work is like one of the fundamental things that we do, and it's often what makes our users happiest. And we found that by getting hundreds of millions of people as individuals, a lot of them bring it into work. And people might not know this, but actually Dropbox is used in millions of businesses around the world. And it's that organic adoption that's worked really well. And now we have we've been adding a lot more firepower to the team and to the product to help make bigger and bigger companies successful on Dropbox. And so, but we've kind of taken our time to pick the right people.
Would you consider your entry into the enterprise a pivot, or is it really just an extension?
No. It was challenging to explain to early investors who would ask, like, oh, are you a consumer company or an enterprise company? And the truth was we're both. But for most companies, that doesn't make sense. You have to pick one or the other. And what we realized over time is that there's a small category of things that you use, from your computer or your phone or your iPad or things like Windows or Office, where you use them for certain things at home and you use them for certain things at work, but it's the same product. And so we had to actually make that clear to the team too, because people were worried that we're splitting the company in these two different directions. But no, this is really, we talk about making people happy when we think about what we want to do as a company. We talk about making people's lives simpler. And a lot of what has made people happiest with using Dropbox is saving time from not having to like email them things like work files, or emailing themselves stuff, or just or all the other frustrations that come at work when you don't have Dropbox.
So people in the enterprise that I've talked to about your entrance into the space, a lot of them have said that you guys aren't ready in terms of security. All these other competitors were built on security from the ground up. How do you counter that criticism, and how are you going to handle that situation?
Well, I think when a company talks about security, there's sort of all these things that get sort of jammed under the same umbrella. And we found in our conversations with enterprises is that it really comes down to like visibility and control. And so what we've done lately, and just manageability in general. So some of the things we've done are we've launched a whole bunch of new features on the admin consoles. I mean, in short, we've focused a lot more on the IT audience to build an enterprise product that they can use to get control back of a pretty chaotic situation. Because IT has all this other stuff going on where people are bringing in their iPads and phones from home, and it's just kind of this mess. And we've done a lot to help them with that. And actually, I think focusing on the end user has made us a lot more secure and a lot more scalable and a lot more reliable, because you think about the pressures of having to operate a service 24/7 for hundreds of millions of people. You have to be really, really good. And whenever you have any kind of problem, it's like national news. And so I think being battle hardened at the scale where we are and having the Darwinian pressures of people having to choose to use Dropbox has led us to have a much stronger product in businesses and enterprises.
Is there a company or a company in a time and place that you'd liken yourself to?
I mean, I look at the last generation of internet or tech companies, and there's something about them that we like really admire about each of them. I mean, I think, if I had to pick one, I think one thing that's interesting is we have that consumer and enterprise kind of crossover, and I think Microsoft in the 90s was kind of the last, or the company that most comes to mind as having this massive opportunity in both places.
How are you going to avoid Microsoft's fate?
Well, I mean, I think, well, we think more about just like how do we build things that people really want and like not try to do too much. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with Microsoft, but I think it's just that focus on product. I think one of the great things that we've seen from like Apple and other companies is really this focus on products and focus on doing a few things really well.
I know one way that big companies avoid stagnation is through M&A. And so you guys acquired Mailbox.
Yes.
Has that been moving the needle for you?
It's been fantastic. The team is really amazing, and email is an area I've personally been excited about for a really long time. And so that's one of these things. And the team, what was interesting about the team is they were excited about email, of course, but it was really, they had this idea that, or what motivates them is like, if you can save like millions of people like 10 minutes a time, you can save just like lifetimes of pain. And email was just one thing that they worked on to make people's lives better at the office. And actually before that they were working on a task management system. And so it's worked out really well. And then the product has been growing like crazy, and they're adding support for other platforms and other mail backends. So that's been going really well.
How many users does Mailbox have now?
We don't have any numbers to announce on that front.
What was the last number you told us?
Actually not sure what the number. I know the mailing list was the backlog got to like a million plus, but we haven't announced active users.
Are you guys going to buy a bunch more companies? I mean, you said yourself that you have all that money from the last raise.
Yeah, I'm sure we will buy more companies in the future, but we're really picky about that. It's not like we're trying to go out and get a whole bunch of ones. We want to get a few of the really great companies.
Do you think there's been sort of too much M&A lately? Like everyone's just sort of buying companies willy-nilly? Marissa, you're back there somewhere?
I mean, no, I think this is part of the natural order of things. This kind of pattern has been happening for the last like 10 years.
But what about the idea that acquisitions sort of kneecap innovation? That maybe if you had sold your company 5 years or a few years ago, like a year into it, that it wouldn't have grown into the company you have now. Are you worried that that's happening as well?
Well, I think it really depends on the company and the market, and I think there's sometimes there are situations where the company sold too early, but actually, in the cases where we've been interested, we've been able to give these companies a much bigger playground, and we've been able to free them from having to worry about things like, okay, where do we get our next round of financing? How are we going to make money off of this thing? Like, there's all these other boxes that you have to check to make a successful company, and we've helped these founders have an environment where they can reach they're guaranteed to reach a huge audience, and often work on even more than they were doing with their company. So it's not just like, oh, we're going to work on this product and it's going to have a bigger user base. It's like, we're going to work on this stuff, and we'll also work on these unrelated things at Dropbox. And so a lot of the founders that have come into the company have way more responsibility than they would have anticipated.
So let's talk about you then as a founder and CEO. What is it that you think you could do better as a CEO right now?
Well, I think one of the challenges is just, as you're growing really quickly, as you're doubling or tripling the size of the company every year, there's just like so many different moving parts. And like a lot of stuff becomes really complicated all at the same time. So we have this huge developer audience, and we're going into the enterprise, and we just opened up our first international office in Dublin, and we have another office we just opened in Austin. There's all this stuff is happening, and so you need to be able, I think the challenge for me is just keeping, is just getting used to that, and while still being able to focus on the areas where I can personally make a big difference.
Are you ending up having to delegate a bunch of tasks or people to handle things?
And it's just recruiting. I mean, hiring really, really great people is something that takes a lot of time. And you think about the enterprise, and for a long time, probably people were wondering, like, what are we going to do there? But now we've added executives from Salesforce and VMware and Symantec and Google and these places. And then when you find the right person, like, that's really when things start moving, and that's been a really exciting thing.
So I was impressed at Disrupt last year when Mark Zuckerberg admitted that HTML5 and building their mobile apps on that was a big mistake. Is there any big mistake you think Dropbox has made yet that you're looking to correct in the next year?
I think just moving faster on the mobile transition. That's been something that is talked about endlessly, is how just sort of the disruption that's come from mobile. But I still think people underestimate it, and that the reverberations are still going to be happening for a long time. And so when you think about the Dropbox product, I think in retrospect there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff we're working on that's going to come out soon. But I would have loved to be faster in that transition to be out in front of it more.
What did you miss by being too slow in mobile?
I think, well, mobile for when we started was really this extension of this magic folder that we put on your computer. That's where we started. Where the mobile app is really this window into the stuff on your computer. If you were to start Dropbox over again, you probably wouldn't start by building like a Windows file synchronization client, but that's the world we came from. And so now we've stepped back and thought a lot more carefully about like, well, what we're really building is like this home for all of your important stuff. And what we're building is completely different from the experience that we have today.
So what would you build if you had to start on mobile?
Well, you'll find out.
Yeah, so give us a little hint, come on.
Well, we look out there, and there's there's been so much change, and there are all these experiences that have just like not caught up or are like completely broken, have become completely broken because you have all these new things, right? So I'll give you an example. When we started, or a couple years ago, we're like, okay, we love the fact that we have this camera in our pockets all the time now, right? So you can take pictures anywhere with a phone, but now you have this like new problem where if you leave the phone in a cab or like leave your iPad on a plane, like it's like a new catastrophe where like all the pictures you took on that thing are gone, and you just never had to worry about that before. So we made camera uploads to continuously save photos that you take on your phone or your tablet to your Dropbox, and there's a million things like that, right? It's even now it's still a pain to like get all your photos together to share them privately. You think about your life at work. You use all these different tools that you have to like cobble together all these different tools from different decades, whether it's like email or like Office or all these different things. And I think a lot about in a couple like what will we look at 2 years from now and be like, what the hell are we doing? And I don't think you have to look very far to see things that are really screwed up.
So you got this huge pile of photos that you've saved for me, and I have no idea they're all with some terrible image 34687 name to them. What are you going to do to help me figure my way through that? Are you guys going to do like facial recognition, location batching, things like that?
Well, I think step one for us was really helping you upload the photos in the first place or get them into your Dropbox. And yeah, there's all kinds of things we can do to help you view them and share them. And I think that's the kind of thing on mobile where there's tons of opportunities, whereas photos are all over the place, to provide much better kind of native mobile experiences.
So can you see a future where you're not the CEO of Dropbox?
Not right now. I mean, there's so much that I want to do.
It sounded like you were about to say, I hope not.
I was gonna say I have like, they're like biological limitations. But
wait, you're gonna be like 140 years old and maybe then you stop?
I mean, this has been like the best adventure I can think of, and there's like so many things that we can still do, and I feel really lucky. 5 years ago we launched right here, and so I actually got these like flashbacks as I'm like walking backstage because I remember like being being on the battlefield. It was called TechCrunch 50 back then, and like trying to make sure our demo worked, and we were like super late and freaking out, and I think we've tried to work hard and do a lot of things, but we're really fortunate to be where we are. And so to have a chance like this in a platform where we can reach all these people and solve all these problems is really personally exciting for me. So we have tons and tons of stuff. I have tons of stuff that I want to do.
All right, I'm gonna ask you something tough.
Okay.
How have the Edward Snowden leaks affected your business?
Well, as like an American, it's like super, it's frustrating the lack of transparency. And I'm sure that, we, like all cloud services, it just makes things more complicated with how, people regard cloud services I think day to day it hasn't had much of an effect, and we weren't part of all the stuff with prison and things like that. But we wish the government would be more transparent about this stuff.
Are American companies doing enough to protest the government for what they've done?
Well, I think you're starting to see more and more efforts on that front. I mean, we have certainly always resisted anything that, or it's pretty fundamental. I mean, you just even read our privacy policy or terms of service. We lay out in plain English how we interact with law enforcement, what happens when there's a request. We've had a transparency report. And I think you're seeing more activism among some of the bigger companies too about trying to push for more transparency in government. And it's one of those things that's frustrating as an American company. All it uses these with the laws of the land.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, I think continue to push for that kind of transparency and treat our users how we would want to be treated. And I think one of the things we've done is really that, speak in plain language about it's a big decision to put your stuff on, to have your stuff go from your hands onto servers like ours, whether you're using Dropbox or Gmail or any cloud service. And so we take that responsibility really seriously. And one of my personal motivations is to build the kind of place, to build the kind of home for people's stuff that I would want to have.
Well, if you guys are going to be the home for my files, I want you to fight to protect my home. So I hope to see you guys do that for us in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you very much.